Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'll be reviewing the film Warfare, and in the second half, I'll be reviewing the movie Death of a Unicorn. So starting off with Warfare, this is sort of a spiritual sequel to director Alex Garland's movie Civil War from last year. Both films are made by him and distributed by the studio A24. Both films are about combat and war involving Americans, and both films use incredible sound design to convey how intense things really are in these films. And, I'll say that while they are sort of spiritual sequels, they are in no way related. That's kind of what I'm getting at there. It's like they kind of have the same spirit going on. You can kind of feel that they are made by similar people, but they are in no way related, so you do not need to watch Civil War to watch Warfare or vice versa. They're completely separate films. And while I'm getting on about the sound and everything in this film, I want to really just talk about how good the sound is in this movie. I think sound in general is a very important tool in film. A lot of people say you can have a movie that doesn't look great, but if your sound's good, that feels like a real movie. But if you have a movie that looks great, but it sounds bad, it just takes a lot away from it. And sound is so crucial in a film. I think a lot of people underestimate how important sound really is. And this movie, Warfare, uses sound so well. It plays a large part of the storytelling on display here. It's used to convey just how loud things are and how devastating things are in the movie. And there are also these moments where so little sound is used that you could literally hear a needle drop. You could hear a pin drop. And it's so effective in that way. I mean, this movie's just it's really loud. I saw it in standard, and it's not even I didn't go for Dolby or IMAX or anything like that. I did hear a lot of people say before you saw this movie, go see it in the largest, loudest theater you can. Unfortunately, just the kind of times I had to go standard, but I thought it was still, even in standard, it was still verging on too much, just how loud it was. I was like, wow, this movie's loud. And I can only imagine, my eardrums, getting blown up. I saw this in, Dolby, which I did see Civil War in Dolby, and that was a really effective experience. I mean, it was so loud, you literally felt the gunshots were, right there. And I can only imagine how much more effective it even would have been for this movie had I done that. But still, very good experience, especially in the theater. And sound mixing is really great too. There are some scenes where a lot of noises and sounds are playing over each other, but I found that I was still able to hear everything that was happening and distinguish what was what. I do kind of wonder how much that will vary for people depending on how they see this movie. I think my theater had very good sound setup and a good sound system. I don't know if you saw this in just your local neighborhood theater, if it would still convey that same sound mix just as well, where you have less speakers. I don't really know. I'm kind of curious to know how that would play, especially on TV too, where if you watch this movie at home. I know a lot of movies nowadays, they're kind of designed for these large, cinema sound setups. And I think at home, I think a lot of the film studios actually have to create new audio mixes. I know the movie Zone of Interest that came out a few years ago had an incredible use of sound, and they literally had to change the way the movie was mixed so it would play differently at home versus in the theater. And I think that might be the same case for this movie, but I just think it's mixed super well, where I was literally watching the movie and I could hear things on the left side of the auditorium, things on the right side of the auditorium, and things sort of in the middle. And it was really interesting, a really fascinating use of space in the audio, and I thought that was really cool. I've never really seen things like that just quite as effective as it was here. I mean, it's really well done. One of the best uses of sound I've seen in a movie in a very long time. And still kind of going into the sound, there is no musical score in this movie, which is in some ways disappointing to me because I love hearing a good movie score. But in this case, I think it works in the film's favor. It's really trying to put you in the same headspace as the soldiers, and by taking out a lot of the music and just sort of trying to manipulate dramatic moments, it just feels very natural. It feels very real in that sense. You're not hearing this heroic music when something happens. You're not hearing this creepy music that comes in when things are getting bad. It just makes it very unpredictable, and I think it makes it a little more uncomfortable not hearing any score. So I thought that was a really cool move that worked in the movie's favor. And as a whole, I think it's very safe to say this movie's goal isn't to feel like a movie. So in addition to no musical score, there's also no three-act structure. And if you don't know what that is, like every movie kind of has a three-act structure where you have the first act where things are set up, the middle act, the second act where everything's just kind of moving along and you're kind of the main character's just kind of in the middle of their journey, and then the third act when the big boss fight happens, things get really crazy and you have the big climax. And this movie doesn't have that. It just kind of feels like one giant scene. Like it just feels like one long short film. And that is kind of how this movie plays out. It just doesn't really have a story. It's just kind of like this is a single moment in time. It sort of plays in real time, but not to tell a story, more just to convey a point. And in addition, there's no time to really sit down with the characters and kind of get to learn who they are or why they're there. It's really literally just a moment in time spread across 90 minutes. And really all you get character development wise is like there's a little portion sort of in the first 30 minutes where characters are just kind of waiting, and you get to maybe see a little personality come out in that time, but you don't really get to hear the characters say like, oh yeah, my name is, X and Y, and I'm here because blah blah blah. You don't get that. It's just very, like, characters are just talking about what they're doing, they're talking about, what's happening right now in the moment, and they're just not really, like, conveyed as, like, characters in a story. You're not really learning about them, you're just kind of a fly on the wall watching them deal with this thing at the time. And I think for some people that may be really cool. For others that may be a little bit, disappointing. And I'll kind of get into where I stand on that. But I think that was just kind of what this movie's going for. It's not trying to feel like a movie. It's not trying to be a traditional Hollywood film. And what this film is more than anything a nightmare. It's a brutal and relentless nightmare that just keeps going and just keeps showing this disturbing imagery and stuff that makes you sad watching it. It's absolutely not a feel-good war story, so don't go into this expecting to feel like a triumphant happy ending or anything like that. It's not supposed to make you want to be in the military or be a soldier or a Navy SEAL. It's supposed to like really do quite the opposite, make you be like, I can't believe these people actually went through this stuff. And speaking of which, this movie is entirely based on the memories from the actual soldiers who went through this. I believe that they really were just trying to recall the events as much as possible and not try to fantasize or make anything as, more over the top or crazy than it actually was. I think, and that kind of says a lot because this movie really does get very brutal, and just to think that's how these people remember this and how realistic it is for them, is pretty crazy. I mean, and the whole thing really just does feel like a giant nightmare. I mean, the way things play out is just like, it's terrible. It's very disturbing. It's very upsetting. But that's what this movie's going for. And the film is co-directed by Ray Mendoza alongside Alex Garland. And in Mendoza's case, he's actually a former Navy SEAL and brings his real-life experience to this movie. I mean, I think he's really what's kind of bringing these memories to this film and what's bringing all of his experience back into this film. And you really feel that. You really feel like this is someone who has some experience and has something to say, kind of laying down all this information on us. And it's very effective. I thought it was a really interesting experience in that. And then you have Alex Garland, who can bring his signature tension and uneasiness to bring Mendoza's story to life. So it's a good collaboration. Like, it feels half like Mendoza's movie, that, it's his story, his experience, his perspective on things. And then you have this other part that's like, it's in the style of Alex Garland. It's in the style of his movies and feels like an Alex Garland movie that's kind of telling a different person's story. And I'll say this, if you've enjoyed Alex Garland's other movies, you'll probably like this too. Personally, I really liked Ex Machina and Annihilation. Men in Civil War, not quite as much, but I still think they're well made. I think they're undeniably beautiful looking movies. And Warfare has a lot of what you liked about his other films. Great sound, awesome visuals, I love the way this movie is shot, memorable scenes, intensity, and strong performances. I mean, this is really an ensemble film. There's not like one particular performance where I'm like, that person stole the show. It's just kind of a big ensemble of people, and everyone gets a moment to shine, and everyone's good. I thought everyone did a good job. But I will say here, and This is kind of where maybe some people will differ from me. I didn't love this movie. The main reason for that is actually what some people will love about this movie, and that's where this might get a little interesting for people listening to this. If you have seen the movie, I'm curious to know where you stand on it and maybe how you differ from my thoughts. But for me, it's just that there's not a lot of movie here. And I kind of talked about that a little earlier. It just doesn't feel like a movie because it doesn't really feel like it's trying to tell a story. And this movie has a lot of good individual scenes, but I was kind of hoping for more of a narrative through line or even just a little more character development to make me feel for the people in this story a little more because you're seeing all this, very horrible stuff happening to these people, and I felt bad for them certainly, but I just wish I had a little more attachment to them as people, outside of the war so I can maybe like just kind of just connect to them more on a human level than just see the soldiers there. And that's kind of where I stand on that. The movie's kind of like Dunkirk in that sense, which is also just an experience and not so much a story. But I think Dunkirk to me is the better movie and has more of what I'm looking for in this type of film. If you are going that route, if you are going the route of just telling a vision and an experience, Dunkirk has the score and it's blaringly loud. And Dunkirk's not really focused on characters, but it kind of tells the story in a non-linear way, so it still kind of makes you think while watching it and has just a little more going on, I feel like. So Dunkirk to me is maybe a little more what I kind of wanted out of this type of movie, but I still really do appreciate the way warfare plays out and how it's made. And I think there will also just be a lot of people who like how much this movie puts you right in the middle of things without any context, how much this movie just challenges you to just watch all this stuff going on and not really have any idea really of like who these people are or why things are happening like this. And I certainly enjoyed it, but I think I was hoping for a bit more out of it, like just hoping for a bit more to really bite into and chew on. And I'd also say by the second half of this movie, I was getting a little numb to everything going on. I wasn't like quite on the edge of my seat anymore like I was during the first half. And I just kind of wish it was having a little more to say. I guess that's kind of how I felt about Civil War 2. I just felt like that was a movie that had similarly beautiful imagery and great sound design and horrifying imagery as well. And it was just a very intense movie. But I didn't really feel like either of these were actually saying a whole lot. They were just kind of very gripping experiences. And I just think I'm not really sure this is a movie I'd recommend to everyone. I do think it's well made and deserving of the praise it has. I mean, it absolutely is a well made film, don't get me wrong. And I did enjoy it, but it's only a movie I'd say for you to go seek out and go see if you really love intense war movies and don't mind the lack of a story or character development. And I mean, I think if you liked Civil War and you saw that last year and you were like, I want more films like that, then I think you will enjoy this movie. If you didn't like Civil War and you just don't like very intense war movies and you don't like the violence in them, I think you can probably sit this one out. But I think it's really just kind of a case-by-case basis on whether you should or should not see this. But I'm going to give this movie a B. I definitely did enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, like I think it is well made, but I think I was hoping this would be a little better. Alright, and moving on, we have Death of a Unicorn. Yes, that is the title of this movie. If you haven't heard of this film, you're probably wondering, what the heck is this crap? A dead unicorn? What kind of movie is this? Why would Hollywood make such a thing? Why do people watch this? And let me tell you, I actually thought the trailers looked really good. I thought it looked like a lot of fun, ridiculous, it was cheesy, exciting. Like, that's what I thought this movie was going to be from the trailers. And I love a dark comedy, especially when you have some horror thrown in there for a good creature feature. And that just seemed so up my alley. I mean, you have Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega playing a father and daughter who accidentally kill a unicorn, and they go to this rich family who want to exploit its resources until something happens with the unicorns, and then people start to get killed, and it becomes a crazy nightmare, violent fuel, it just becomes nuts. And it's such a wild, crazy concept that I want more of from Hollywood. Like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with a good four-quadrant movie every once in a while that's, like, aimed at everyone, kids and adults and men and women and everyone, but I don't know, just this is such a niche idea that is such a fun, random idea, and it's very much up my alley. Which is why I'm very sad to say this movie is very mid. I feel like a lot of people use that word these days, like they just kind of throw it around like something is very mid, And I don't usually like to say that much, but I think in this case it's well deserved. Everything in this movie is just very half-baked and mediocre. Jenna Ortega, Paul Rudd, and the rest of the cast are good here. You also have Will Poulter, who is actually in Warfare and this movie too. But I think the whole cast is definitely the best part of the whole movie. And the story, which sounded so fun and creative to me on paper, is mostly executed in a very generic way. It just doesn't really think outside the box very much. It doesn't really take those extra steps I was hoping it would to be just something crazy and bonkers. And just watching this movie, I felt like it was something I'd seen before, but not really in a good way. And I think a good analogy for this film is that it wants to be Jurassic Park. Like it thinks it's Jurassic Park. It just kind of has brand new story, just crazy idea, but it really comes across more like Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, which if you've seen those two movies, you know the difference. Like, you know that Fallen Kingdom is no Jurassic Park. I mean, if you think Fallen Kingdom is as good as Jurassic Park, more power to you. But I wasn't a big fan of the way writer-director Alex Sharfman helmed this film. From a screenwriting point of view, not to sound too critical, but a lot of the jokes just didn't land very much for me. This is like very much a horror comedy, and I thought the comedy aspects of it just weren't very funny. I mean, you had a few chuckle moments. I thought the first third at least had some of the best jokes. But even so, I just wasn't really like laughing very hard at any of them. Honestly, I can't really recall more than like one or two jokes that I enjoyed, so I think that kind of speaks to the comedy. I thought Ortega and Rudd did a good job with what they could, but the characters weren't well written, and a lot of the kills here are very predictable and not that creative. I just didn't really feel like the horror was very well executed either. And as for Alex Sharfman's direction, it's not bad, but I thought the movie just looked pretty okay, and the lighting was often too dark and just wasn't really, I wasn't really able to see exactly what was happening sometimes. And part of that is on the cinematography and the lighting department, but I think it's really the director's job to look at that stuff and say, I think this should be lit differently to convey the effect and mood I want. If that's what Sharfman was kind of going for in his mood, that's fine. I just didn't really think it worked for me. I thought it just was kind of too dark, just kind of hard to see everything. And I think when you have a movie about a unicorn attacking people, it should be a bit more colorful and crazy. Think more like Midsummer or something like that. And I will say the production design is nice too. I just wish I could see it better in the darker scenes, which is unfortunately a large part of the movie, especially in the second half. And I'll say this, the first half of this movie did have a lot of promise and got me excited for what was up ahead. I thought it kind of had a nice groundwork. I thought everything was kind of set up to be very interesting, and it had me on, it had me excited to see where it would go. But I'm pretty bummed that what could have been a cult classic and a memorable B movie is sadly very forgettable and mediocre. That kind of falls apart in the second half and just becomes something that I just don't really care for and honestly wouldn't really want to rewatch. I think this could have been a lot of fun. This could have been this year's Megan or M3gan, whatever you call it. We're getting a second movie for that this year, and I thought the first movie was a huge pleasant surprise that could have been really dumb, but just kind of did everything in a smart, cool way. And I think Death of a Unicorn had a very similar potential that could have been just exciting and silly and stupid, but all in the right ways. And it just wasn't that. I was really disappointed by this film. It probably will be one of my my top 5 most disappointing films of the year, and it will also probably be one of the most just mid movies of the year. I really just don't feel like this is a movie I'll ever think about, just besides how disappointed I was. And don't get me wrong, I didn't hate it. It's not a bad movie. I mean, I probably sound very critical on it right now, but that's more just, I think, my expectations versus reality, not how the movie actually was. It's a fine movie. It's not a bad one. Everyone does a fine enough job, but I just think it could have been a lot better, and I really wanted this to be good. So I'm gonna rate it a C. It's just very mediocre. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.